Yes, folks, you may have noticed there's a 2-minute delay because we're on very slow internet. Okay, Mr. Band Leader, let's start that music up one more time. It's 65 degrees where I am. welcome to GoFor Lunch, number 25. And today we are in Studio C. What does the C stand for, you might ask? Well, it stands for two things. The C of Cortez and Bahia La Choya. So we have a much better view here than we do in the or in Studio A or Studio B. The view looks a lot like, in fact, that is the view right there, live from Studio C. Right to my right, I have the Choya Bay, or Bahia La Choya, as we call it here in Mexico. Buenos dias, Elena. And hello, Judy. So, been really windy down here. And I was hoping to do this like outside to really get you a feel for what it's like here, but it's still blowing about 15, 20 miles an hour out there. So that's not conducive to good broadcasts. So welcome to GoFor Lunch. I am Roger Harmon with GoFor Technology, where we try to make your technology work for you in your everyday life. As always, we are doing this live so you can ask questions. Now, today, because the internet speed here is slow, muy despacio. So there's quite a delay, like a 2 or 3 minute delay between the time you post a comment in the chat and I see it. So I'm not ignoring you. Just remember that there's a long delay today because the internet. And we might have some buffering. I tried to get my internet service provider to increase my speed, but apparently it hasn't happened. So we will just do the best we can. And if it gets too bad, remember you can always watch the replay, which you can find in the GoFor Gazette, our newsletter that comes out every Monday via email. So no stupid questions. Don't hesitate to ask, because you're helping yourself and probably some of the other people that are watching. So let's jump right into our topic today, and that is printers. So I know sometimes we get aggravated with our printers because it seems like when we need them the most, they don't work. So there's two basic kinds of printers. There's the inkjet printers and the laser printers. So we're going to contrast those today and figure out which one is best for you, or maybe which two are best for you. So the difference between inkjet and laser printers is the toner and the ink, or the type of material used to do the printing. So the inkjet uses a liquid ink, and the laser printers use a toner, which is a powdered substance. So let's look at the pros of inkjet printers. They're inexpensive, remembering, of course, that you get what you pay for. They have good color image quality, and they don't take up a lot of desk space. You can get some that are fairly compact. The cons on inkjet printers is because they are inexpensive, they are disposable. They don't make spare parts for the lower end inkjet printers. So when it's broke, it's broke. And you just have to buy a new one. Sorry, that's the way it is. The big problem for us here in the desert is that the ink in the cartridges, if you don't use the printer about once a week, then the ink will probably dry out. It'll clog the nozzle in the inkjet cartridge, and you can't print. The way you fix that in most printers, the exception is Epson, but in most printers you just take the cartridge out, buy a new cartridge, and you're back in business. Epson printers, unfortunately, I guess there's a good reason for it, have the printing mechanism instead of being on the cartridge like HP and Brother and Canon and the others. is built into the printer itself. So when the Epson clogs up, you got a lot more to deal with right there. So I don't recommend Epsons for most people. So let's look at some other things that we can do to save our ink on our inkjet printers. Number one, you need to print about once a week. You might be able to get away with twice a week, but once a week is a good idea. So maybe you should have some little project like a calendar, or you could print a weekly calendar or something like that, just to keep the clogging from happening. Don't turn your inkjet printer off. Don't turn the power off, because when you turn it back on, it goes through a maintenance cycle. You know how the inkjet printers make all the little noises before they ever do anything? Well, that's the maintenance cycle. And when you turn it off and turn it back on, it goes through that maintenance cycle. But if you leave it on, it doesn't do it as much. So that will save you some ink by keeping it turned on. It has a power saving. All the printers nowadays have a energy saving, Energy Star system where they automatically, power down and use very, very little current when you're not using them, and then they automatically wake up when you go to print. So just let the printer do its energy saving thing. Don't turn off the power. Another way to save on ink, on an inkjet, is to, if it has an adjustment, to print in draft, which means it doesn't spray as much ink on the paper. So for things that are not that important, especially documents maybe that you just are printing for a record, try to use draft mode, and that will save ink as well. And then you need to think twice before doing a large color photograph, like maybe a 5x7 or an 8x10. That's going to take a lot of ink and tend to be very expensive. So what you want to do there is print it elsewhere, and we're going to get into that in just a second, how you can and where you can do that. So what I do and what I recommend and have been recommending for years is, if you really need to print color, then keep your inkjet printer. But if you find that most of the stuff that you're printing is documents, black text on white paper, then a laser printer would be much better, because they don't dry out. When you need them, they work. So the pros of a laser printer is, first of all, they're not as expensive as they used to be. It used to be they were, only office printers, and they were very expensive. But now you can get a good laser printer for around $100. So they have a lower cost per page. Again, they don't dry out, and they print sharper text than an inkjet. Now, if you want a laser printer and you want color, then you are getting into a little bit more expensive situation. So the criteria for judging a printer is cost per page, CPP, cost per page. So we calculate the cost per page by adding the cost of the medium that you're printing with, whether it be a toner cartridge or an inkjet cartridge. We divide it by the number of pages that the manufacturer tells us that they expect that cartridge, or that cartridge, we just call them cartridges, to yield. You add in the paper cost. So there's a cost there. If you're using like regular 20-pound paper, that'd be one cost. If you're using a better, like 24-pound paper, of course, that's going to be a little added cost. And then that gives you your cost per page. And of course, if you're doing color ink cartridges, you're better off to get a printer that has individual colors, so that when one color runs out, you just replace that one cartridge. Whereas some printers have all three colors, in one cartridge, and if one color runs out, you have to buy the whole new cartridge. So that can add up to more expense. So on the color cartridges, of course, you have to add the cost of the cartridge, the page yield, and then they take the color cartridge cost and multiply it by 3, because there's usually the three basic colors. And you get the cost per page that way. So there's a way to save money on a certain brand of inkjet printers. I will briefly mention that lately, in the last couple of years, they've come out with these tank printers where you get a bottle of ink with like 4 ounces of ink for each color. And they're supposed to last for 1 or 2 years. But they have the same problem of drying out. They haven't thought about us here in the desert and fixed the drying out problem. So even though they look like they would be, they are on paper, they're cheaper, and but in the long run, they can dry out just the same as the regular cartridges. So let's look about where you could print color other than on your inkjet at home. The places I think of are CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, Target, Office Depot, FedEx Office, Costco, Sam's Club, and the UPS store. So if you're doing anything, like maybe you are doing a project for a club that you belong to and you need 100 flyers, the place to print those 100, and they're in color, the place to print those 100 flyers would be at one of those places, because it's going to be cheaper than running them on your printer. Now, of course, you could print like 10 flyers a week to get your weekly printing routine in there, then that would be good. So, excuse me, many people think that they need to have a all-in-one printer that does printing, copying, scanning, and faxing. But the reality is most of us maybe fax, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So many of these places I just named will also do your faxing. So you don't need to buy that printer with a fax built in that you only use a few times a year. So that's another thing to consider. A nice thing about most of these places is that you can email in your print job. You can send your image, your file that you want printed to them, and then they will let you know when it'll be ready. So you just make one trip there, it's all ready to go, you're in and out. So another convenience of using a third party to do your printing when you're doing either big color or lots of copies. Okay, so let's pause a little bit here and say hi to Phil and Phyllis. And so Judy wants to know, what is the typical lifetime of a HP Envy, which is one of the HP lines of printers. What is the typical lifetime of those printers? I had a client the other day that had a printer that was, I think, 2006, and it just died. I've had people have them die in right after the warranty expires, in 2 or 3 years. So it just varies. So it's hard to say. So Leslie Ann has a great question for, remember when we used to travel? So when you're traveling, your cartridges are going to dry out. So you can either plan to buy a printer when you get back, and the sad thing is that sometimes in the lower cost printers, it's cheaper to buy a new printer than to buy a set of cartridges. The drawback to the new printer is the cartridge that comes in the new printer don't have the same amount of ink as the cartridge that you buy as a replacement cartridge. So again, that's kind of a tricky deal. The ideal solution would be to buy a laser printer, even a laser color printer, and we'll talk about cost here in a minute. And it won't dry out. So in the long run, it'll be less aggravation and probably even less cost. And yes, Bob, that would work. However, I do take American money as well. Thanks for asking. Okay, so let's look here at some of the things that we can see on the internet. So that's my notes. That's not what we want to see on the internet. Here's what we want to see on the internet. So when you look at the actual cost of Inkjet ink, it costs $50 an ounce, which is $6,400 a gallon. So when you compare that for the same price that you'd pay for a gallon of ink, you can get 2,250 gallons of regular gas. You can get 2.3 bottles of very expensive wine, or you can get 2,254 gallons of whole milk. So that ink is more valuable than gold, literally. So I just thought you might like to know about that. Okay, so let me switch back here. So the question is, why does this happen? And the reason it happens is because of the way the Inkjet printer works. So this is a very simple diagram. So this top part here, let me get back here where you can see my cursor. So this part up here in the gray is the ink cartridge. The gold color here is the actual ink. The nozzle is around the ink. And then what it does is it actually sprays the ink onto the paper in a pattern resembling whatever you want to print, whether it be text or whether it be a color photograph. And this is the area where it dries up, right here where the ink comes out of the nozzle. So that's just a fact of life. We haven't figured out apparently how to keep that from happening other than printing once a week. So let's talk about the costs here. So let me switch over here to Safari. So here's my favorite site for checking on things before I buy them. It's the Wirecutter. A couple years ago, the New York Times purchased the Wirecutter, which has been around for a long time. So all I did to get this information was type in the search box up here, best laser printer. And I would look at a couple of different sources. So the reason I say that is when I see their first choice here, and it's an HP color laser printer, I'm wondering, what are they smoking? No. So I thought it was kind of an odd first choice. So this will tell you the second choice, which is what they call their budget choice, is a Brother laser printer. Now, this only does printing. It doesn't do scanning. It doesn't do copying. It just does printing. So you have to keep that in mind. If you want a printer that does printing and scanning and copying, then here's one, the Brother. And then they have the upgrade pick for $600. So you can see the prices here. the this is about $250 for the multi-purpose printer. So, but I also check on Amazon. And actually, I don't even recommend printers anymore personally. I will refer you to these sites because when you read the reviews on Amazon, I read the 1-star reviews, it's depressing. So here's a little comparison that you can look at. One of the big things that I see in reviews of all the manufacturers is that they lose their Wi-Fi settings. When I was doing the research for today's broadcast, I noticed in the latest HP models, they have a feature called self-healing Wi-Fi. So they have recognized that their printers lose Wi-Fi connections, and that they're trying to do something about it. So that is good. It's a good thing. So let me tell you about another way that you can save money on ink. And that is, let me get back to my web browser here. And this only applies to HP. And I had this all set up and now it's gone. But we have a way to bring it back. So HP has a program called Instant Ink. And when I first read about this, I was very leery about it. However, I did a presentation on it a couple years ago and found out that in fact it is a good deal. So what it is a ink subscription service. It only works again on HP printers, but what happens is you tell them how many prints you anticipate doing a month. So they start at 50 and then they go to 100, and then I think the next one, I'd have to look, maybe 200. So then the printer is connected through the internet to the HP mothership. So when it's getting low on ink, it notifies the HP, and you get this little brown box on your doorstep with new cartridges. So the 50 pages a month costs $2.99 or $36 a year. So you know that when you go to the store and buy those cartridges, how much do they cost? Like $60 if you buy a set of cartridges. So, and that's not for a whole year. So this is a good program, and it works with all of their latest model printers. So here are the printer lines that it works with. And those are the, HP prices. So, you're going to get them cheaper at your local stores or Amazon. So that is something that you should look into. Here are the prices, or the amounts. They don't show the prices on this page. But I think it's a good plan. And again, if you can figure out a way to print once a week, this would be a much cheaper way of keeping your printer in ink than going to buy those cartridges at the store or on Amazon. So let's do this. Oh, hit the wrong camera. Okay, so hopefully, let me kind of wrap this up. It would be cheaper to add a $100 laser printer to your existing inkjet, because the laser printer would pay for itself probably in less than a year, because the cost per page would be less than the inkjet, and it would also be a convenience factor because it wouldn't dry out. You wouldn't have that problem that I know I have one client that doesn't use her printer very often. She goes on a trip, when she used to go on trips. She goes to print her boarding pass, the ink's dried up. She can't print it. So with a laser printer, you wouldn't have that problem. So if you do need to do color, you could have both, a laser printer and a color printer. And of course, if you have a little bit more money in your budget, you could get the color laser printer, which gives you the best of both worlds. You get the color and you get the convenience of knowing that it's not going to dry out. So hopefully that has been enlightening to the world of printing at home and other places. So I'm going to take a break here, look at the ocean while I wait for your comments to catch up with me, because again, we do have a delay. So, why didn't that change? Oh, here we go. So, the pelicans were out there diving for food. Oh, here comes one. Watch for him. There he goes. Is he going to dive for food? Not on camera. No, he kept on going. Okay. So Phil and Phyllis are using the HP Instant Ink program, and they say it's great. Thank you, Phil and Phyllis, for adding that to the conversation. So it looks like we are caught up here on comments. So, thank you for coming. As always, I do make house calls. I do wear a mask if you like. And I can also do things remotely. The remote thing, doesn't work great all the time, but usually it'll work. But I have been visiting lots of people in person in safety, so we can do that if you need me. Just give me a call on the phone number that will come up at the end. Please share this experience with your friends and neighbors. Feel free to forward the Gopher Gazette to anybody that you might think would be interested, and so we can help more people. So thanks for viewing. Have a great rest of your week and stay safe.